I raised my stepdaughter like my own. Then she said I wasn't invited to her wedding. I still remember the first time I saw Sarah. She was sitting on the floor of her mother's living room, surrounded by crayons and a coloring book, her tiny fingers smudged with every color imaginable. She looked up at me with big, cautious eyes, the kind of look a kid gives a stranger who might become something more. She was 6. I was 34, a mechanic with grease under my nails and a quiet heart that had been bruised more times than I cared to admit. Her mom, Mary, had this air about her, composed, elegant, like she'd spent her whole life keeping things in tight boxes with neat labels. I fell for her anyway. Or maybe I fell for both of them. I'm still not sure. The day we got married, Sarah wore a yellow dress and carried a little bouquet of fake daisies. She clung to Mary's side at first, unsure of what all this meant. But by the end of the reception, she was sitting on my lap, her head against my chest as I hummed some half-forgotten tune. She fell asleep there, and I remember thinking, this is it. This is the start of something good. I never tried to replace her father. I didn't even know him. He was gone before I entered the picture, just a shadow in a few old photos that Mary kept in a drawer. But I was there for everything else. I taught her how to ride a bike in the cracked driveway behind our old house. When she fell, she scraped both knees and bit her lip to keep from crying. I carried her inside and cleaned her up, whispering silly stories about a brave astronaut who had scraped her knees on the moon. I taught her to read when she was 7, not just sound out words, but to fall in love with them. Every night we'd curl up with a flashlight under a blanket fort, going through chapter after chapter of Charlotte's Web and The Secret Garden. She had a curious mind, wanted to know everything. Why the sky changed colors, why bees made honey, why people lied. When she caught the chicken pox at 8, I stayed home from work for a week. I made her oatmeal with cinnamon, set up a camp on the couch, and let her watch cartoons until she laughed herself into a nap. At night, when the itching got bad or she felt scared, she'd call out, not Mom, but Dad. The first time she did, I froze. Then I went to her room, tucked her in, and kissed her forehead. I never asked her to say it again. I didn't need to. She made me a Father's Day card that year. Just printer paper folded in half with a stick figure of us drawn on the front. To my dad, it said, in bright red crayon. Inside was a messy poem about how I fixed her bike and made her laugh and gave the best hugs. I still have it. We had our rituals. Saturday pancakes with blueberries. Sunday walks in the park with the old Labrador we rescued from the shelter. We planted tomatoes together in the backyard every spring. They never grew that well, but it didn't matter. What mattered was the dirt under our nails, the sun on her face, the way she'd look at me and say, "We're a good team, huh, Dad?" She drew all the time. Sketch pads filled with dreams, horses, dresses, castles in the sky. I built her a little desk in the garage when she was 10, right next to my tool bench. She'd sit there with her pencils while I worked on engines. We didn't talk much, just shared the space. It was enough. Middle school came, then high school. She got moodier, more private, but never mean. Not with me. I went to her art shows, her school plays, her senior exhibition. I remember standing in the back of the auditorium, watching her read her poem to a silent crowd. My throat ached with pride. When she got accepted into the art college 2 states over, I helped pack the car. I fixed the brakes, changed the oil. I bought her a toolbox, not because she'd use it, but because I wanted her to always have something from me in case things broke. She hugged me before she drove off. Tight, no words. I felt her tears on my neck, but neither of us said anything. In the years that followed, we didn't talk as much. That's natural, I guess. She had her own life. I still sent her cards, birthdays, Christmas. I sent her photos of the dog until he passed. She texted a simple thanks most times, sometimes a little heart emoji. Mary and I divorced last year. Amicable, as they say. We'd become strangers in the same house, long before it ended. I thought maybe, just maybe, Sarah and I would stay close. She was an adult now, old enough to make her own choices. Then last week, I got a call. It was short, awkward. "Hi, Carl. I just wanted to let you know that I'm getting married in September." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I said, genuinely happy for her. "Do you need help with anything?" There was a pause. "I wanted to tell you, you're not on the guest list. I hope you understand. It's complicated." And just like that, something cracked. "I understand," I said, because I didn't know what else to say. But the truth is, I don't. Because after all the scraped knees and bedtime stories, the tears and laughter and Saturday pancakes, after everything we'd been through, she still didn't want me there. The call had ended, but her voice kept playing in my head like a broken record. "You're not on the guest list. I hope you understand." I didn't. Not really. A few days later, I was sitting in the kitchen, the same kitchen where Sarah had once spilled pancake batter all over the floor. She was 8, trying to surprise me with breakfast on Father's Day. I ended up doing most of the cooking, but she served the meal with a crown made out of aluminum foil and a hand-drawn menu that read Dad's Diner. Now, the same kitchen felt cold, lifeless. The ticking of the wall clock was louder than usual. Mary walked in, heels clicking on the tile like punctuation marks. "You okay?" she asked, but not in a way that implied she actually cared. "I talked to Sarah," I said, staring into my coffee. "She's getting married." "I know," she replied, reaching for her phone without sitting down. "She called me last week. She said, 'I'm not invited.'" Mary paused. "Barely." Then shrugged. "She wants to keep things simple. Her grandfather is paying for it." I looked up. "What grandfather?" "Her biological father's dad. He reached out a few months ago. They've been reconnecting." The words hit me like a slap I didn't see coming. "You mean the man who never once called her on her birthday? The man who walked out before she could even form a sentence?" Mary sighed. "He's still her family, Carl. He wanted to be part of this. He offered to pay for everything. Venue, dress, catering. It's a generous gesture." "So, money buys history now?" I snapped, my voice rising before I could stop it. She didn't answer. "She called me Dad," I said quietly, "for over a decade. I was the one who stayed." Mary crossed her arms. "Look, I know you were there for her. No one's denying that. But this isn't your role to question. It's her decision, not your role." That phrase, she used it a lot toward the end of our marriage. Anytime I tried to speak up about something, Sarah's schooling, her friends, her curfew, it was always not your role. I left the kitchen, heart pounding, and called Sarah again that evening. No answer. I texted, "Can we meet? Just want to talk." Surprisingly, she agreed. "Quick coffee this Saturday," she replied. 11 a.m. at that bistro on Pine. When I walked into the cafe, she was already there, sitting at a table by the window, checking her phone. She looked so grown up, confident. Her dark hair swept back in a low bun, blazer, pressed, makeup minimal but sharp. She'd become everything we hoped she would, articulate, self-made, successful in PR. I felt proud and small. "Hey," I said, forcing a smile. "Hi, Carl," she replied. "Not Dad, just Carl." That was the first sign. We made awkward small talk for a few minutes. She told me about her fiancé, Greg, some finance guy she met at a work event. "He's steady," she said. "Safe. The kind of man her mother would approve of." "I'm happy for you," I said honestly. "Really?" She nodded. "Thanks." I hesitated. I wanted to ask, why? "Why am I not invited?" Her smile faltered. "It's not personal," she said carefully, like she was rehearsing a line. "It's just complicated." "Complicated how?" I asked. "I raised you. I taught you how to ride a bike, remember? You called me in the middle of the night when your cat died. I was there for everything." She looked down at her coffee. "I know, and I appreciate that. I always will. But," she sighed, "Greg's family is traditional, and Grandpa Henry, he's covering the costs. He wanted it to be about real family." And honestly, part of me agreed. That word, real. "What does that mean, Sarah?" I asked, my voice trembling now. "You think I'm not your real family?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said it, the words I never thought I'd hear. "You were always there, and I'll always be grateful. But you're not my father, not really. You're not blood." I froze. "Blood?" I echoed. She nodded, looking uncomfortable. "I just think, maybe it's time we stop pretending." Something inside me cracked wide open. I nodded slowly, stood up from the table. "I see. Carl." "No," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "It's fine. I hope the wedding is everything you want it to be." I walked out before I could break. Back in my truck, I sat there for a long time, gripping the steering wheel like it might anchor me to the earth. I pulled down the sun visor and opened the little flap where I kept old photos. One slipped out, a picture from her high school graduation. Sarah, in her green robe, beaming, standing between me and Mary. Her hand gripped mine so tight, my knuckles were white. I stared at it, my chest aching. I thought love was enough. That time, consistency, sacrifice, all of it would mean something in the end. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe family really is about blood, about names on a birth certificate, about men who show up only when there's money and a camera involved. I'd built my life around the idea that love makes a father. But now, sitting there in silence with a faded photograph in my hand, I wasn't so sure anymore. I thought family was about choice, about who shows up. I thought I'd earned the right to be called Dad. Turns out, I was just filling in, a placeholder until someone more real came along. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Mary had fallen asleep hours ago, or at least she had stopped talking. The room felt cold, even with the windows shut. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the shadows from the streetlight outside forming long, crooked lines above me. No matter how I turned, sleep wouldn't come. I gave up just after 2 a.m., pulled on a sweatshirt and padded downstairs in socks. I wasn't sure where I was going at first, just moving, trying to silence the ache in my chest. But my feet led me to the garage. I flicked on the light. Dust hung in the air like memories that refused to settle. The old workbench was still there, covered in tools I hadn't used in months. Boxes lined the shelves, most labeled in Mary's sharp handwriting. Xmas, kitchen stuff, old files. Then, tucked in the corner, behind an old bike frame and a broken lamp, I saw it. A worn cardboard box, unlabeled, taped once, now peeling. I recognized it immediately. It was the box of things I'd saved from Sarah's childhood. I carried it to the workbench and opened it slowly, like I was unsealing a time capsule. Inside, finger paintings, paper flowers, a construction paper Father's Day card with glitter that still stuck to my fingers, and letters, dozens of them. Birthday cards, notes she'd left me on the fridge, crayon-written lists of things I love about Daddy. One caught my eye, a folded piece of pink paper written when she was maybe 10. To Daddy Carl, you are my hero. Thank you for loving me, even though you didn't have to. I think that makes you the best kind of dad. Love, Sarah. My hands shook as I read it. She meant it. Back then, I sat there for a long time, surrounded by scraps of a love I thought would last forever. Eventually, I pulled a notepad from the drawer, the kind I used to leave reminders on, and started to write. The words came slowly at first, then all at once. Dear Sarah, I'm not angry, just tired. Tired of holding on to something that clearly let go of me a long time ago. I don't regret a single day I spent being your dad. Not one. I'd do it all again. The midnight fevers, the math homework, the way you clung to me at airports. I was there because I loved you, not because I had to be. But maybe that was never enough. I guess I needed to say thank you for letting me love you. And goodbye. Because it's time I stop hoping you'll love me back the way I did you. Love always, Carl. I stared at the letter. Then slowly, wordlessly, I tore it in half. Then again, and again, until the pieces were confetti in my lap. I took them outside and lit a match. The flame caught quickly, curling the edges of the paper until it was gone. I stood there in the dark, watching smoke rise into the night sky, wondering if grief has a shape and whether it could look like ash. The next morning, I was packing a small duffel when Mary stepped into the bedroom doorway. She was still in her robe, arms crossed. You're leaving? She asked. Her voice wasn't angry, just tired. I didn't stop folding. I'm not making a scene, I said. I just need to be somewhere else for a while. She watched me for a long moment. Then, you have to understand, this isn't about you. I paused, looked her dead in the eye. That's the thing, Mary. It's always been about me. When she had the flu and you were out of town, it was about me. When you two went to Paris and I stayed back for a school project, me again. When the tuition bills came and you said we'd figure it out later, I paid them. All of them. Her lips tightened. You're not being fair. I laughed softly, not with humor, just disbelief. I'm not trying to be fair. I'm being honest. I zipped up the bag, walked past her into the hallway. She didn't follow. Outside, the morning was gray and quiet. My car sat in the driveway like it had been waiting for me to finally admit something to myself. I placed the duffel in the back seat. Then, as an afterthought, went back and grabbed the box from the garage, the one with the cards and notes. I didn't know what I'd do with it. Maybe leave it at a rest stop somewhere. Maybe keep it forever. I wasn't ready to decide. I sat behind the wheel, one hand resting on the box beside me. I didn't cry. Not yet. But as I pulled out of the driveway and turned onto the empty road, I felt something settle in my chest. Not peace exactly, but maybe a kind of clarity. Some people get the title of father by blood. Others earn it through years of love, patience, sacrifice. And sometimes, even that's not enough. The apartment was small, one room, kitchenette in the corner, a window that overlooked the back of a grocery store. But it was mine. No photo frames on the walls, no sound but the low hum of the refrigerator. I kept the place neat, not because I was trying to impress anyone, there was no one left to impress, but because order felt like control. In the mornings, I'd wake with the sun and make a single cup of coffee. No rush, no demands, no voices down the hallway asking where the car keys were, or if I remembered to sign the check for school books. Just silence. Stillness. At first, the silence pressed in like a weight. Later, I grew used to it. Then, I started to need it. I found work at a local workshop run by a nonprofit. Nothing fancy. They repaired old bikes, broken lawnmowers, household tools for shelters, low-income families, veterans. I didn't get paid much, but that wasn't the point. It gave my hands something to do. My mind, too. Every day was the same. I'd unlock the doors at 8, wipe the dust from the benches, check the donation bin. The smell of oil and rust became oddly comforting. Some people hate routine. Me? I clung to it like a raft. One Tuesday, I spent 5 hours fixing a kid's bike with a bent frame and no brakes. When I finally got it working and rolled it out front, a single mother with 2 kids came to pick it up. She didn't say much, just smiled and said, "Thanks, mister." But the look on the little boy's face, that stayed with me for days. Evenings were quiet. I'd sit by the window with a paperback novel or the local paper, listening to the buzz of the street below. I wasn't happy, but I wasn't suffering either. I just was. I told that to my neighbor one night, an older man named John, a retired vet who lived next door. We sometimes talked in the hallway or shared a coffee on the front steps when the weather was nice. "Funny thing about life," he said, sipping from his chipped mug. "People think you're supposed to be climbing, chasing, doing. But sometimes the most honest thing you can do is stop, sit still, let yourself fall apart a little." I nodded, unsure how to respond. John leaned back, staring at the sunset like it had secrets. "Sometimes you gotta get completely lost to figure out where you're really from, who you really are." He wasn't wrong. Before, my days had been filled with other people's needs. Now, they were filled with mine, even if they were simple. A bike to fix, a sink to unclog, a page to turn, a meal for one. I didn't know if this was healing, but it was something. Nearly a year passed like that. One morning in late fall, I came back from the shop to find a single envelope in my mailbox. No return address, just my name, handwritten in blue ink. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, the envelope heavy in my hand despite weighing almost nothing. Back upstairs, I sat at the tiny table, turned on the old lamp and opened it. Inside, one sheet of paper. The handwriting was unfamiliar, precise, formal, but the signature at the bottom, it made my breath catch. It was from Mark, Sarah's fiancé. My would have been son-in-law. The letter sat on my kitchen table for 2 hours before I opened it. I'd made a cup of coffee, poured it, let it go cold. I read the name again, Mark, the man Sarah had married, the man I'd never met, never spoken to, never been introduced to. And yet, here he was, reaching out. Eventually, I unfolded the single page. The handwriting was clean and deliberate, the kind of neatness you see in someone who rewrites drafts before committing to pen. "Dear Carl, I hope this letter finds you in some kind of peace. I know it's not my place to write, and I understand if this never reaches you, or if you choose not to respond. But I've carried this with me for almost a year now, and I couldn't keep silent any longer." I leaned back in my chair. "When Sarah and I got engaged, I assumed you would be part of it all. She spoke about you, even if briefly, and never unkindly. I imagined that you'd be there when we picked a venue. I thought you'd give a toast, that I'd shake your hand and say thank you for raising this woman I love. But then one evening, she said you wouldn't be coming, that it was better that way. I asked why. She said, 'It's complicated.' I pressed. She shut down, Her mother did the same. They made it clear this was final. No invitation, no discussion. Carl, I didn't agree with them. I didn't know the full story, and maybe I still don't. But it didn't sit right with me. You were there her whole life, and then suddenly you were erased, like a line drawn too quickly and then crossed out. I tried. I really did. I asked her, what about the man who raised you? The man who taught you to ride a bike? Who showed up at every school play? She said, he's not my real father. That phrase hurt to hear, and I'm not even you. I don't know how much pain that day brought you. I don't know if you waited by the mailbox for an invitation that never came, or if you stood near the church in secret just to see her in the dress. But I knew it was wrong. My hands had started trembling. I placed the letter down for a moment, breathing through it. I could picture it. The white dress, the flowers, the smile I'd never see, the seat I was never offered. After the wedding, I found a box of old things Sarah had kept, letters, cards, photos. One picture stood out, her between you and her mom, all three of you grinning like fools on her graduation day. Her hand is gripping yours so tight, it's like she didn't want to let go. On the back, in her handwriting, it says, with my hero, my real dad. I've included it with this letter. Maybe you've seen it before, maybe not. But I thought you should have it. Because whatever people say now, I believe that at some point, for a very long time, you were the center of her world. And that matters. It should. With respect, Mark. At the bottom of the envelope, tucked neatly behind the letter, was the photo. I recognized it instantly. The three of us on the high school football field, just after Sarah's graduation. She'd refused to wear heels under her gown and stood on tiptoes between us, her arms slung around both our waists. She had my sunglasses on, crooked. Her smile was crooked too. I flipped the photo over. There it was, in blue ink. Her handwriting. You always were my dad. I'm sorry. Sarah. It was the first time in over a year that I let myself cry. Not quietly, not discreetly, not with the kind of practiced stillness I'd mastered during the long, numb months. No, this was different. The tears came fast and hot and without warning. They blurred the photo. They soaked the edges of the paper. I wasn't even sure what I was crying for. Was it sorrow? Relief? Grief that someone remembered? Gratitude that someone, even a stranger, saw me? I sat with it all, folded over at my tiny table, with the window cracked open to let in the chill. I didn't know what the letter meant, whether it was a door cracked open or just a kindness sent too late. But it existed, and so did that picture, and her words. And that night, for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel erased. I felt seen. She was already sitting when I walked in. Corner booth, far wall, back straight, but only just, like someone who'd been holding their breath for months. Her hands were wrapped tightly around a mug, even though the coffee inside looked untouched. I stopped for a second at the threshold of the cafe, not because I hesitated, but because I needed a breath too. Then I crossed the room. Hi, Sarah, I said, gently. She looked up, older, not in years, but in weight. There were shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there before. She didn't smile. She nodded instead, voice quiet. Hi, Dad. That word hung in the air between us like something both sacred and broken. I sat across from her. The hum of the cafe, dishes clinking, low conversations, a song I couldn't place, all faded into background blur. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said it. He made me choose. I didn't need to ask who. I knew. She kept her eyes down. Grandpa said, if I wanted to be in the will, if I wanted to be seen as a real Miller, I had to let go of you. He said you were never really blood, and that it would only complicate things. I was scared. I thought I could make peace with it. A shaky breath. But after he died, and I saw your name missing from everything, no photo, no story, not even a mention, it felt like I'd cut off a part of myself. And now that the money's there, the inheritance, the house, I just feel empty. Her voice cracked. It wasn't worth it. Not one bit. She finally looked up. I wanted to write you earlier. I tried, 100 drafts. Then Mark sent his letter and I thought maybe you'd never want to see me again. I swallowed hard. My voice, when it came, was calm. Even. I forgave you already. She blinked. What? I forgave you, I said again. Before the wedding, before the silence. before the photo, because if I didn't, it would have eaten me alive, and I've already spent too much of my life carrying pain that wasn't mine to hold. Her lower lip trembled. She bit it hard. I ruined everything, she whispered. No, I said. You didn't ruin everything. You made a choice, a terrible one maybe, but a human one. People do that all the time. I was cruel. You were afraid. Silence again, but warmer this time, like we were no longer tiptoeing through glass. I miss you, she said, every day. I miss your stupid jokes, your garage radio, how you used to hum when you cooked. I let out a soft chuckle. Still hum. But now it's mostly alone, over toast. She reached into her coat and pulled out a smaller envelope. I don't expect anything, but this is a photo of us, from when I turned 10, the birthday with the rainstorm. You made me a cake in the microwave because the power went out. I smiled at the memory. It exploded, but it was the best cake I ever had. I took the envelope, didn't open it yet, just placed it gently next to my cup. Can we start again? She asked, voice barely audible. I looked at her, really looked. This wasn't the same girl I raised. This was a woman who'd walked through shame and come out the other side with eyes wide open, still hurting, still healing, but brave enough to sit here. And I wasn't the same man either. I'm not your dad anymore, I said gently. Her face faltered. I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. I'm not your dad, Sarah. Not in the daily way, not in the bedtime stories or college loans or weddings. That chapter's closed. But I am a man who loves you, who wants good things for you, who remembers your laugh and your scraped knees and the night you cried when your goldfish died. She nodded, crying now without hiding it. That love never leaves, I said. It just changes shape. She held onto my hand like it was a life raft. I'm proud of you, I added, for showing up, for saying what's hard. That takes guts. I don't deserve this, she whispered. Maybe not, but love was never about deserving. We sat there until the coffee went cold. No promises, no big reconciliations, just two people sharing a table, the weight of years between them slowly lifting. Eventually we stood. I paid. She didn't argue. Outside the sun had broken through the clouds. Not warm, but bright. A soft wind brushed past us. She hesitated. Can I call you sometimes? You can, I said, but don't expect the same man. I've changed. Life does that. I know, she nodded. And then, just before she turned away, she said, thank you for being my dad, even when I didn't deserve one. I smiled, and then I walked, down the block, past the bakery that hadn't been there a year ago, past a mother tugging her child's mitten back on, past the noise, the traffic, the history, and I felt light, freer than I had in years. Sometimes, being a father means holding on. Sometimes it means letting go. And sometimes being a father means walking away and still loving from afar. 1 year later, the workshop was quieter in the winter. Most of the kids had gone home early, some to families, some to warm dinners, and some just because the cold made fixing a chain feel harder than it was. Carl stayed late. He always did on Fridays. He wiped his hands on a rag, checking the alignment of a donated bike's back wheel. A girl from the shelter had picked it out last week, said she wanted to learn to ride before the snow wins. Carl had promised he'd get it ready. A knock came at the workshop door. It was John, his neighbor, holding out a small envelope. Postman left this with me. Thought it looked personal. Carl nodded, took it. Thanks. He didn't open it right away. Not until the bike was done and the lights were dimmed and he sat with his coffee, steam curling upward in the cold air. The envelope was red, handwritten, his name in a script he knew. Inside, a Christmas card, a watercolor tree on the front, and inside, 2 lines, Merry Christmas, Carl. Thank you for being there when it mattered most. Sarah, no photo, no address, just words. Carl smiled, not wide, just enough. He placed the card on the shelf above the workbench, beside the one photo he'd kept, Sarah at age 10, gap-toothed and grinning, sitting on his shoulders at the park. Then he turned off the light, locked the door, and walked into the December night. His breath made clouds in the air, but he didn't notice the cold.